Mark sat alone in the living room, the soft hum of the rain outside blending with the distant ticking of the old wall clock. He felt a strange heaviness in his chest, one he couldn't shake no matter how much he tried to distract himself with work emails or mindless scrolling. The day had started like any other, but there had been a quiet tension he couldn't ignore, a whisper in his mind telling him something was off. He noticed the small things first: Anna's delayed replies to his messages, the way she seemed lost in thought when he spoke to her, the way her laughter, once easy and warm, had grown faint and measured. He tried to convince himself he was overthinking, that maybe she was just tired or preoccupied, but deep down, he knew it was more than that. As the afternoon faded into evening, Mark's unease turned into a dull anxiety, a knot of fear that tightened every time he imagined what might be going on in her life that didn't include him. He thought of their early years together, the days when they couldn't get enough of each other, the nights filled with quiet conversations, soft touches, and the feeling of being completely understood. He wondered when that intimacy had begun to drift away, when the laughter had dimmed, when the sense of connection had been replaced by polite smiles and polite words. The front door opening startled him, and his heart jumped as he looked up to see Anna step in, water dripping from her coat, hair slightly damp, her face partially hidden by the collar of her jacket. For a moment, he just watched her, unsure whether to call her name or run to her, because she seemed both close and distant at the same time. He noticed how she paused, almost hesitating, as if expecting him to react, as if she knew something had changed between them and wasn't sure if he was ready to hear it. He felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief because she was home, dread because the look in her eyes told him that whatever she had been keeping to herself, he might not like it. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, as Mark tried to find the words that could capture what he was feeling. The fear, the suspicion, the hurt, and the longing all wrapped into one. "Anna," he said finally, his voice low, almost breaking, almost pleading, because he didn't know if he could handle the truth or if he even wanted to, yet he had to know. Anna gave a small, tense smile, the kind that tried to mask discomfort, and she hung her coat, her hands fidgeting with the buttons, a nervous habit she had when something was wrong. Mark felt his chest tighten further, the uncertainty gnawing at him like a quiet storm. He took a step closer, trying to read her expression, trying to find any sign of the woman he had married, the woman he had shared his life with, the woman who had once been his safe place. And then the words, sharp and impossible to take back, tumbled out of his mouth before he could stop them. "Do you love him?" The moment the words left him, he realized how heavy they were, how loaded, how capable of changing everything in an instant. Anna froze. Her smile disappeared, replaced by a look of shock and vulnerability, and she pressed her lips together, blinking as if she hadn't expected him to speak the question aloud. The silence that followed was almost unbearable, stretching out in the dim light of the room, filling every corner with tension and unspoken truths. Mark wanted to reach for her, to take her hands, to demand answers and comfort at the same time, but his body felt frozen, caught between hope and fear. He could feel the blood pounding in his ears, the rapid heartbeat, the way his stomach churned with the anticipation of what she might say, what she might admit, what might come next. He watched her closely, every small movement, every shift of her eyes, every hesitant breath, hoping for a sign, a hint, a clue to what was really happening. Anna finally looked at him, her gaze meeting his, filled with a mixture of guilt, regret, and something else he couldn't quite name, something that made his stomach tighten even further. He wanted to scream, to cry, to laugh, to curse, to hold her all at the same time. His mind raced with memories, the first time he saw her laugh so freely that it lit up the room, the nights they stayed up talking until sunrise, the quiet moments when their hands brushed and neither had to say anything because everything had already been understood. And now, after all that, a single question hung between them, heavy and fragile, like a thread stretched too far, and he feared that if it broke, nothing would ever be the same. Anna opened her mouth, hesitated, and then looked away, her fingers twisting nervously, and Mark felt his heart drop because he saw in her hesitation that the answer, whatever it was, wasn't going to be simple. He wanted to ask again, to demand honesty, but he knew that whatever she said next would carry the weight of months, maybe years, of hidden feelings and quiet distance, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for that burden. The rain outside tapped against the window, a soft, persistent reminder that the world continued, oblivious to the turmoil inside their home, and Mark felt both comforted and more alone than ever. He realized in that moment that he had a choice: to run from the truth or to face it, to risk heartbreak or to cling to hope. And he took a deep breath, steadying himself for whatever confession was coming, knowing that the next words would shape the rest of their lives. And so, in the dim glow of the living room, two people sat, separated by love, fear, and secrets, waiting for the fragile thread of honesty to be drawn taut, not knowing if it would hold or snap, not knowing if their hearts would survive the storm they were about to face. Anna sat down slowly on the edge of the couch, her hands resting nervously on her lap, her eyes fixed on the floor as if the tiles could answer the questions her heart could not. Mark stood a few feet away, his arms crossed, jaw tight, heart pounding with a mix of fear, anger, and desperate hope, waiting for her to speak, to explain, to say anything that could make sense of the heaviness that had fallen between them. "Mark," she whispered finally, her voice shaky, carrying the weight of months she hadn't shared, emotions she had buried to keep the peace, and truths she had avoided because she was afraid of hurting him. Mark swallowed hard, his throat dry, and took a step closer, leaning against the wall, trying to steady himself against the storm of emotion that rose at the sound of her voice. It's not what you think," she started, but even as she said it, her words faltered, betraying the uncertainty she felt. He shook his head slightly, not wanting excuses, not wanting platitudes, wanting the raw truth, even if it hurt more than he could bear. "Then tell me, Anna. Don't dance around it. Because I feel like I've been standing outside our marriage looking in while you've been somewhere else, somewhere I can't reach." Her lips trembled as tears welled up, and she tried to explain, her voice breaking under the weight of her own guilt. "I didn't plan this. I didn't mean to fall for someone else. It just happened. I felt something I didn't understand at first, something that made me feel alive in ways I haven't felt in years, and it scared me, Mark. I was confused, and I didn't know how to handle it. I never wanted to hurt you." Mark felt a sharp pang in his chest, a combination of sorrow and shock that made it hard to breathe, because the woman he loved, the woman he thought he knew completely, was telling him that her heart had wandered, even if unintentionally. "Scared you? Scared me too," he said, his voice low, controlled but trembling, because anger and pain and longing all collided inside him. "I've been scared of losing you, of realizing that we were drifting apart, and now I feel like I already have, even though you're sitting right here in front of me." Anna's eyes met his, glistening, full of remorse and longing, a mixture that both broke and softened his heart at the same time. "I love you, Mark," she said, the words falling fragile and tentative. "I think I always have, but there's a part of me that was searching for something I couldn't name, something I didn't understand, and it made me make mistakes I wish I hadn't." Mark sank into a chair, his hands gripping the arms tightly as he struggled to process her confession, feeling a mix of relief and despair, anger and compassion, confusion and longing. He remembered their early days, the promises, the laughter, the quiet moments where they didn't need words to feel complete, and he realized that what they had wasn't gone. It was buried under layers of unspoken feelings, unmet needs, and mistakes that had crept in slowly over the years. "Anna," he said finally, his voice softening, almost breaking, "if we want to survive this, we have to be honest, completely honest. No hiding, no pretending. I need to know everything, even the parts that hurt, because I can't fix what I can't see." She nodded, swallowing hard, tears slipping down her cheeks, and for the first time in weeks, they both allowed themselves to feel the raw truth of the distance and the love between them. She explained more, telling him about her moments of doubt, her loneliness even in their home, her longing for connection, and the fear that she might never feel alive in the way she remembered from her younger days. Mark listened quietly, the weight of her words pressing against his chest, making it ache and swell at the same time, because he realized that marriage wasn't just about love, it was about understanding, compromise, forgiveness, and courage, and they had to find all of those again if they wanted to survive. He reached out slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and Anna leaned into his touch, trembling, both afraid and comforted by the contact. "I don't want to lose us," she whispered, and Mark felt tears sting his own eyes because he realized he didn't want to lose her either, not now, not ever, even if her heart had faltered for a moment. "Then we fight," he said quietly, taking her hand in his, feeling the warmth, the softness, and the reality of their connection that had never really disappeared, just been clouded by doubt and fear. They sat there in silence for a long time, letting the storm of emotions settle, letting the truth be said and heard, feeling both broken and hopeful, knowing that love was never simple, never easy, and that what mattered was choosing each other despite everything, despite the hurt and the mistakes. Outside, the rain had softened, and the light from the street lamps spilled into the living room, warm and comforting. And it felt like a small promise, a gentle reminder that even after a storm, there could be calm. Mark realized that forgiveness would take time, that trust would need rebuilding, and that the road ahead would not be smooth, but for the first time in weeks, he felt a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other, stronger and more aware, more honest and more present. He leaned back, looking at Anna, seeing her vulnerability and honesty, and he understood that love was not about perfection, but about resilience, about willingness to face pain together, to hold on when everything inside you is trembling, and to keep choosing each other no matter how many times life tested them. Anna squeezed his hand gently, a silent promise, and Mark felt a flicker of warmth, of familiarity, of the bond that had never truly disappeared, just hidden under fear and misunderstanding. And as the night settled around them, quiet but full of tension and possibility, they both knew that this was only the beginning of a journey of honesty, forgiveness, and rediscovery, and that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, holding on to the fragile thread of love that still connected their hearts, even after the hardest question had been asked and the raw truth had finally been spoken. The days that followed felt heavy with unspoken thoughts, yet there was a quiet tension that carried a strange comfort, as if the honesty between Mark and Anna had cracked open a door to something raw and real. They moved through their home like cautious dancers, each step measured, each glance tentative, trying to find the rhythm they had lost somewhere along the way. Mark watched her closely, noticing the small gestures he had missed in recent months, the way her hand brushed against the table when she reached for a cup of coffee, the thoughtful pauses she took when reading a message, the way her laughter, though quieter than before, still had a delicate warmth that reminded him of early mornings they had shared, wrapped in blankets and whispered conversations. He found himself waking up with thoughts of her, wondering if she slept well, wondering if she still felt the same pull to him that he felt for her, wondering if love could survive confusion and fear. Anna, meanwhile, wrestled with her own emotions. Her heart tugged in two directions: the safety and history of her life with Mark, and the lingering uncertainty that had sparked the doubt in her heart. She felt guilty for her moments of longing for something undefined, moments that had caused a rift, yet she also felt a cautious hope that maybe, through honesty and effort, they could rebuild what had been shaken. One evening, Mark found her on the porch, staring at the fading sunset, her coat wrapped tightly around her as if it could shield her from her own thoughts. He joined her, not speaking at first, letting the silence stretch between them, heavy yet intimate, as if the world outside had paused to give them this moment. Finally, he broke the quiet with a soft voice. "Do you know what scares me the most?" Anna shook her head, eyes fixed on the horizon, and he continued, "That I might lose you. Not because of someone else, but because we stopped talking to each other. We stopped sharing our hearts. And somewhere along the way, we stopped noticing that we were drifting apart." She swallowed, a lump in her throat, and finally let her hand brush against his, tentative, seeking, a silent question as much as a reassurance. "I don't want to lose you either," she whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know how to fix this, how to bring back what we had without breaking it further." Mark reached for her hand fully, feeling the warmth, the fragility, the life in her touch, and said, "We start by being honest. No hiding, no pretending. Just us, even if it's messy, even if it's painful." They sat there together, the sky turning darker, stars beginning to appear, letting the breeze carry away some of their tension as they shared their fears, their regrets, and their hopes. They spoke of memories they cherished, of mistakes they wished they could undo, and of small moments they had overlooked that had slowly widened the space between them. Mark admitted his own failings, the times he had been distant, distracted, or unaware. Thinking work or routine was more important than paying attention to the small things that kept love alive. Anna listened, tears slipping silently, and confessed that her heart had wandered not because she stopped loving him, but because she had felt unseen, unnoticed, yearning for connection and reassurance in ways she had not expressed. They laughed softly through the tears at how human and imperfect they were, realizing that love was never simple, never perfect, and that it required courage, patience, and commitment every single day. Over the next few days, they began to rebuild their connection in small ways. Mark leaving little notes for her on the counter, Anna cooking his favorite meal without being asked, lingering at the doorway when passing by, sharing small smiles that carried more meaning than words could hold. They went for walks together, holding hands as they had long ago, feeling the rhythm of each other's steps and the comfort of familiar presence. Each moment carried the delicate tension of hearts cautiously repairing, yet every smile, every touch, every shared glance strengthened the fragile bond that had almost broken. At night, they stayed up talking, sometimes for hours, about everything and nothing, rekindling conversations that had been lost to years of routine, sharing fears and dreams, and learning to listen without judgment, to hear without interrupting, to be present in a way they hadn't allowed themselves to be before. They began to plan small surprises for each other, remembering the joy of thoughtful gestures, and discovered that even in their pain, love could be playful, light, and healing. One evening, Mark found Anna looking at old photographs, and he sat beside her, pointing out moments he had forgotten, laughing at the memories, and feeling a warmth spread through his chest that reminded him why he had fallen in love with her in the first place. Anna leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder, and for a moment they both felt as though time had stopped, the weight of the past replaced by the quiet power of togetherness. Yet even in these moments of closeness, a shadow of fear lingered, fear of repeating mistakes, fear of hidden desires, fear that love might not be enough if they didn't continue to work at it. They both recognized that healing wasn't instant, that forgiveness was a process, and that trust needed to be rebuilt carefully, brick by brick. And still, despite the uncertainty, they felt a growing strength in the knowledge that they were choosing each other every day, that their love was resilient enough to withstand doubt, and that honesty, even when painful, was the foundation they needed to move forward. As the nights grew longer and the days brighter, Mark and Anna began to see each other more clearly, not just as husband and wife, but as human beings, flawed, yearning, and capable of growth, who had made mistakes but were willing to fight for the bond that had brought them together. They found beauty in imperfection, strength in vulnerability, and hope in the shared understanding that love required courage, patience, and willingness to face both the past and the future, side by side. Each evening ended with quiet gestures, a hand held, a soft kiss on the forehead, a whispered, "I'm here," that carried more meaning than grand declarations, moments that rebuilt the trust and intimacy that had been shaken. And through it all, they felt the fragile yet undeniable thread of connection between them, a reminder that even after pain, love could survive, could grow, and could transform into something deeper and more aware than it had been before. The air between them began to hum with possibility, the unspoken promises weaving an invisible safety net, a tender reassurance that while the future was uncertain, they would face it together. And in that quiet, shared space, with hearts open and eyes full of both longing and hope, Mark and Anna realized that love was not about perfection or absence of fear. It was about choosing each other again and again, about walking through the storms together, and about trusting that the heart could heal even after it had been tested in ways that seemed unbearable. The porch became their sanctuary, the laughter and tears their language, and the slow, steady rebuilding of intimacy their shared victory, as they both knew that the hardest part was not confessing the truth, but deciding to stay and fight for the love that still pulsed quietly between them, alive and waiting to grow stronger. A week passed since Mark and Anna had started speaking honestly, and the air in their home felt lighter, yet still charged with emotion, as if every glance, every touch, every shared moment carried the weight of the past and the hope for a future they were rebuilding together. That morning, they sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the sunlight streaming through the windows, highlighting the subtle lines of worry and care on their faces, and Mark took a deep breath, ready to speak words that had been forming in his heart for days, feeling both nervous and hopeful, because he knew that the future of their marriage depended not on grand gestures, but on simple, deliberate choices of love and commitment. "I've thought a lot about what you said," he began softly, his eyes meeting hers with a steady intensity. About the confusion, the distance, the fear. I realized something important. Love isn't just about being together when it's easy, it's about staying when it's hard, when everything inside you wants to run, when every doubt and every mistake challenges you, and I don't want to let that go without trying everything I can to make this right. Anna listened, her hands clasped together on the table, tears forming, but her gaze steady, reflecting the sincerity and vulnerability she had been learning to embrace, and she whispered, "I want to stay, Mark. I want to fight for us. I don't want to regret letting something beautiful slip away because of fear or confusion. I know I hurt you, and I know it won't be easy, but I want to choose us, every single day, even when it's messy." Mark reached across the table, taking her hands in his, feeling the warmth and tremble of her palms, and he realized that the touch carried not just physical connection, but the unspoken promise of hearts ready to forgive, to rebuild, and to move forward together. They spoke then for hours, not about the past and blame, but about the future and hope, making small commitments, agreeing to communicate openly, to notice each other, to cherish moments both ordinary and extraordinary, and to remember that love required attention, patience, and courage, especially when the heart had been shaken. Later, as they moved through the house, preparing breakfast together, they laughed softly at minor mistakes, lingering touches, and exchanged glances that carried warmth and reassurance, realizing that intimacy wasn't only physical, but emotional, built through shared presence, empathy, and trust, being rebuilt brick by brick. They took a walk that afternoon, hands intertwined, the sunlight filtering through the trees, reminding them of the walks they had taken early in their marriage, of dreams shared, plans made, and quiet talks that had once seemed so simple but now felt precious, each step forward symbolic of the journey they were recommitting to, aware that healing was gradual but progress meaningful. Anna pointed out small flowers along the sidewalk, and Mark smiled at her enthusiasm, realizing he had missed noticing these little things, and that paying attention now was part of restoring what had nearly been lost. As evening fell, they returned home, tired but fulfilled, sharing a simple dinner with conversation flowing easily, touches light and affectionate, building a rhythm that felt natural and reassuring, a rhythm that reminded them that love survived through effort, intention, and mutual care. After dinner, they sat on the porch, wrapped in a shared blanket, watching the sun dip below the horizon, and Mark said softly, "We've come a long way, but I know it's not over. Healing takes time, trust takes time, but I believe in us, and I believe that what we have is worth fighting for." Anna leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and whispered, "I believe in us too. I never stopped loving you, even when I was confused. I just needed to find my way back to you, and now I see that the only place I want to be is here, with you." They stayed on the porch long into the night, talking quietly about their dreams, laughing softly, sometimes sitting in silence, letting the comfort of being together speak louder than any words could, feeling the fragile but growing strength of their bond, and realizing that the road ahead would have its challenges, temptations, and fears, but that choosing each other, moment by moment, choice by choice, was the strongest declaration of love they could make. Over the next several days, they continued small rituals that reminded them of commitment, Mark leaving little notes of encouragement, Anna preparing his favorite coffee in the morning, both noticing the gestures, the smiles, the quiet joys that made ordinary days feel meaningful, learning that love was a series of repeated actions, proof of care in small moments, and that consistency mattered more than grand gestures. One night, they revisited the photographs of their earlier years together, laughing at old memories, reminiscing about trips, conversations, and shared dreams, and feeling gratitude for the life they had built, while also acknowledging the fragility of what could have been lost, reinforcing the importance of nurturing their bond. As they lay in bed that night, hands clasped, hearts aligned, they spoke softly about the future, about fears, about hopes, and about the willingness to face challenges together, understanding that honesty, communication, and presence were the keys to sustaining love. That passion was more than fleeting attraction, and that true intimacy came from being known completely, flaws and all, and still being chosen. Days turned into weeks, and their home felt alive again, filled with laughter, conversation, quiet touches, and shared understanding. A rhythm slowly replacing the tension that had once hung between them. Yet both remained aware that the journey of trust and forgiveness was ongoing, that vigilance and care were required, and that the strength of their marriage depended on the choices they made every single day. One afternoon, as they held hands walking through a park, watching children play and couples laugh, Mark realized that love was not about perfection or the absence of mistakes, but about resilience, forgiveness, shared effort, and the willingness to keep choosing each other in spite of uncertainty. And Anna, sensing his thoughts, squeezed his hand gently, feeling the same certainty, the same commitment, and the same quiet joy that only comes when hearts have been tested and survived together. That evening, as they returned home, the air was cool and fragrant, the sky painted with soft hues of pink and purple, and they paused at the door, looking at each other, smiling, feeling the depth of connection and the quiet triumph of hearts that had been shaken but not broken. Mark pulled Anna close, resting his forehead against hers, and whispered, "We're still here, together, and that's what matters." She responded with a soft smile, tears of relief and love in her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, they felt the sense of home, of belonging, and of hope that had been missing. As they entered the house, closing the door behind them, it wasn't just a closing of a chapter, but a beginning of a renewed journey, one built on honesty, effort, and unwavering choice, where love was celebrated in moments large and small, where trust was carefully rebuilt, where hearts beat together with understanding and tenderness, and where Mark and Anna, hand in hand, knew that no matter the storms ahead, they would face them united, stronger, and more aware than ever, proving to themselves and to each other that love, when nurtured, could survive doubt, confusion, and fear, and flourish into something even more beautiful, resilient, and deeply fulfilling than it had been before. Ending this chapter not with certainty of perfection, but with the courage and commitment to keep choosing each other every day, and the quiet, enduring promise that their hearts would continue to grow together, renewed, steadfast, and full of hope.